I'd agree that energy security is about sufficient volumes of fuels at affordable and reasonable prices, but we must also think that the prices must be reasonable as well for the producer. If prices are too low, producers will not make the necessary and sufficient investment to explore, say, new oil fields or gas fields, start new production at new oil or gas fields. And of course, energy security is about diversifying suppliers and diversifying supply routes. But what has not been touched, at least today, is the fact that we also have to give great attention to the question of physical pipeline security. It is critical infrastructure, particularly pipeline-bound gas is a critical infrastructure, and it needs to be protected, if need be, by military means against, well, regional insurgencies or, say, terrorist attacks. I wanted to emphasize here, if you look at the third line from the bottom, that the European Union is still heavily dependent on fossil fuels. It's more than 80% that fossil fuels make of the total primary energy supply of the European Union. So these are the fuels which are used for power generation, heating and industrial processes. And if you compare the European pattern with the one of Russia, you see that despite the fact that Russia today is the largest oil producer with more than 10 billion barrels a day, it doesn't make use of oil that much as we do, but it does make use of what it has in abundance, and that, of course, is gas. Well, 25% at an aggregate level of European fuels is made up by gas. Unfortunately, we had an increase of gas consumption in the European Union of the 27, except for the decline, of course, which is due to the economic crisis of the year 2009. But indigenous production in the European Union is going down. And this is particularly due to the fact that production by the United Kingdom, that's the green line, which peaked in 2000, is going down quickly and dramatically. And according to the IEA prognosis, the volume of gas produced by the United Kingdom by 2030 will be just about 10 billion cubic meters. Well, Norwegian production is going up substantially, but Norway is not a member of the European Union, maybe precisely for that very reason. At the moment, the import dependency of the European Union is at about 62%. That means about 62% of the gas consumed is imported. Well, if the prognosis on consumption in the European Union and Turkey, and if the prognosis on indigenous production are correct, you see that this share of import dependency will rise substantially, up to 90% in the worst case scenario. Well, I need not mention where we have the greatest gas reserves, the proved gas reserves by the end of 2009. And we see that the former Soviet Union, and this is particularly Russia and Turkmenistan, are the key resources or are the key regions with a high volume of natural gas proved reserves, and of course is the Middle East. The major gas suppliers of the European Union are Russia. 36% of the gas consumed in the European Union is supplied by the Russian Federation, but Norway comes in as a close second and is catching up with the Russian imports. Russian imports, by the way, make up about 44% of total EU 27 gas imports in 2010. Algeria is third. But what we see on the next slide is, if you look at the blue lines, most of the gas Europe imports at the moment from Russia and Norway is pipeline gas. Norway exports only a very small volume of gas as LNG. Algeria does, however, and Algeria started with the LNG production already in 1984. But Russia so far does not export any LNG to the European Union. It does so, having forced Royal Dutch Shell to sell its majority stake at Sakhalin to Korea and to Japan. Well, a lot has been said about shale gas production or unconventional gas in general. I will not go into the geological and technical details of this, but let me just mention some of the many disadvantages of unconventional gas. Yes, we have mentioned that there are considerable volumes of unconventional gas in countries like Poland, Ukraine, Hungary, France. But what is true is that the carbon footprint of shale gas is much higher than that of conventional gas, much higher. Secondly, what we need in order to bring out the unconventional gas, the shale gas from the rock formations is the technique of fracturing the rock formations by water, sand, and chemicals, which of course does have a huge impact, or most likely will have a great impact on the groundwater in many parts of Europe. Well, when I mention the negative aspects of shale gas, this most likely will be very well accepted by Gazprom, but still we got to mention that there are quite a few disadvantages. Thirdly, Europe is a much more densely populated region than the United States, so it's much more difficult to do extraction and production of shale gas. The legislation in Europe on the shale gas is much tougher than it is in the United States, and Europe still lacks the infrastructure and the technological expertise. Still, as the speakers have mentioned, shale gas, unconventional gas produced in the United States and in Canada increases the amount of gas available on the global gas market with LNG and CNG, and that of course puts pressure on Gazprom with its long-term contracts, with its take-or-pay clauses, and of course with, on its particular price formula. And we have seen in the past year that particularly the largest consumers of Russian gas have been able to pressure or to force Gazprom to make some changes to the price formula. Let's see and wait what happens in the future in this respect. Well, a few words on the pipelines in the region. I will not mention the Schröder pipeline, also known as Nord Stream pipeline. I just want to go into detail as concerns the southern gas corridor of the European Union and the South Stream project by the Russian Federation and some major European companies. Well, I am from Austria, and of course the OMV is the Austrian National Oil and Gas Company, is very much engaged in the Nabucco project launched back in 2002. We have to say, however, this was an effort by Turkey and by Austria to bring Iranian gas to the European Union. That was why it was initially planned. So far, it has not materialized except for public statements, some important legal documents, but the problem at the moment is we have a lack of gas. Well, we do not take gas that in a midterm perspective is available in sufficient volumes, namely Iranian gas, for reasons we do know. However, maybe in a midterm perspective, even if Iran develops nuclear weapons, we should rethink about Iranian supplies. But we have to say Iran at the moment is not a net gas exporter. It does not produce more than it consumes. It is a very gas-rich country, but no net gas exporter. So which other countries does Nabucco look at? Well, it's Egypt with the South Arab gas pipeline, which is limited in volume. It is thinking about bringing northern Iraqi, Kurdish gas to Turkey. Well, it's highly insecure, both politically and militarily. And of course then the two major sources of Nabucco gas are Azerbaijan and Turkmenistan. Well, with Azerbaijan, it is of course obvious that the country is trying to have as many export outlets that are available to Russia, to Iran, to Georgia, and of course to Turkey. What is particularly disturbing, however, that's a feature I will talk about a little later also with regard to Turkey, is that Azerbaijan is starting to make political linkages of its export commitments to the European Union. That, of course, is the linkage of supplying gas to Europe in exchange for European support to solve the Nagorno-Karabakh issue the way the Azerbaijanis like it to be. Well, Turkmenistan is the major producer in the Caspian Basin, also one of the gas producers which is sought after by the European Union. But as with Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan wants to have as many outlets as possible because it suffered very much by the Russian monopoly of Turkmen exports before 2007. But here Europe is clearly in a strong competition, or say rivalry, with the People's Republic of China. And whereas the European Union speaks about human rights, China does not. And it invests substantially in Turkmenistan. It has invested more than $8 billion only in the past 3 years. And Turkmenistan does export gas to Iran, does intend to export gas via the Tapi pipeline also to India. Well, let's wait and see whether this works out. Well, let me continue. If those are the suppliers, potential suppliers of the Southern Gas Corridor of the European Union, we have no legal long-term commitments by any of those countries to this Southern Gas Corridor. In addition, the Southern Gas Corridor is not just Nabucco. Nabucco is just one of those pipelines. We have others, the interconnector Turkey, Greece, Italy, the Trans-Adriatic pipeline, or an element or a project which I consider particularly important, the idea of bringing Azeri and Turkmen gas to Georgia, transport it via pipeline to Georgian Black Sea coasts, and then bring it as LNG or CNG to Romania and redistribute it there. Because what is particularly worrisome for the companies taking part in the South Stream pipeline, well, Gazprom, the Italian Eni, Électricité de France, maybe BASF Wintershall, maybe even E.ON Ruhrgas. What is particularly worrisome for them, of course, is that the underwater section of South Stream is extremely expensive, and so far the consortium has not either found agreement with Turkey or with Ukraine to build the pipeline on the seabed of their exclusive economic zones. Brings me to another problem. You know that the position of Austria on the membership of Turkey in the European Union is quite negative. What I'm saying, though, is not linked to this principal position to the enlargement of the European Union taken by the Austrian government and all political parties in Austria, but we must be very careful not to give Turkey a too dominant position in gas and oil transit. It would particularly worrisome because we do not know where Turkey is heading to. What we see is a creeping Islamization of that country. It has policies vis-à-vis its neighbors the West doesn't share. And Turkey starts making linkages between its EU membership and its reliable and reasonable and affordable role as a transit country. I think we must not give in to that sort of linkage politics, and that's why I strongly support investing more attention and money in that LNG route on the Black Sea to Romania. Final point, I guess I have already used too much time. Final point I want to say, if we are looking for some sort of Russian-EU cooperation, I, as one, have recommended several times with OMV representatives, and the CEO of Italian Eni has proposed that as well, Mr. Scaroni, merge the northern trunk of the South Stream pipeline with the Nabucco pipeline, get Russian access up to a third of the volumes transported by that northern leg, so we'll have both, or we can have both, South Stream North, which is Nabucco Light, and South Stream linking Russia with Italy. One very worrying thing, of course, is, and that's really the final point, sorry for being too long, we can fully understand that what is important for Europe, energy security, is important for Russia as well. Namely, to have a diversification of export outlets, and Ukraine held a monopoly until 1999. So it is understandable that Russia now is interested in having more outlets. However, when all the plans announced and already implemented by Gazprom are implemented, Russia will have a capacity to transport more than 320 billion cubic meters of gas to Europe. No one needs that in Europe. Russia is now selling about 155 billion cubic meters to the European Union, plus Turkey. So what is that large volume for? Of course, it is a leverage over Ukraine and its political, economic and security policy development things.